Welcome, everyone. We're really pleased that you can join us. And, we're really pleased with the turnout as well, because it's obvious that, sessions like this are here to help you and needed in your conservation journeys. We do actually, I think, plan to host more and similar webinars later in the year. So just keep an eye on our social channels and on our platforms. But very quickly before we get started, so we are recording this session. So that is hopefully all right for everyone. And then also please, for now, keep your cameras turned off and yourself muted, since there are quite a few. We've set aside plenty of time for questions, and we did receive, we asked everyone to submit questions when you signed up for the webinar, so we'll be going through some of those, but certainly please feel free to enter any questions in the chat, because we'll be answering some of those both by our presenters as well as on the chat for you. I do want to say, if you do have any specific questions for specific donors, we aren't going to be covering those, but that's something that we will be sharing requirements and other information from all of the different donors that are represented on this call in a follow-up email. And so we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can in the time provided. But with that, so I do want to just briefly say we have representatives from the Conservation Leadership Program, Conservation Connect, the Mohammed bin Zayed Conservation Fund, People's Trust for Endangered Species, Rufford Foundation, and Whitley Fund for Nature, all represented on this call here to answer some of your questions. But so just to go ahead and get us started, I'd like to briefly introduce our two speakers. So Anne Alexander is the director of both the Prince Bernhard Nature Fund and Conservation Connect. She is a biologist that used to run field projects, but for the last 10 years has been sitting on the other side of the table as a fund manager. And Carla Hernandez is Senior Program Officer for the Conservation Leadership Program and based at BirdLife International. She oversees the CLP Team Awards and leads multiple aspects related to CLP's grant management. But with that, let's get started. And Anne, go ahead and please share your screen.
Thank you so much, April. I will indeed share my screen. I hope everyone can see it. So hi, everyone. Welcome to this first talk in the webinar series of what to expect after submission. My specific talk will be about what to do after you receive a grant. As April said, I'm co-founder and director of Conservation Connect and director as well of the Prince Bernhard Nature Fund, the PBNF, which is an old endowment fund already since 1994. That gives $30,000 small grant funds to red-listed species projects in the Global South. And since recently, the grants go through Conservation Connect, which is a spin-off from PBNF. It is a young organization of only 4 years old, and we consist of a consortium of currently 20 funds. We give small grants up to 20,000 euros to projects worldwide, and also do some capacity building and courses on the side. Since I don't have so much time to cover a wide variety of topics, I thought I start with 5 advices of what to do after you receive a grant. First of all, to make sure you monitor the right things, ideally following a theory of change. To keep your donors engaged and in the loop. Third of all, to tell your story and share your findings. Fourth, to connect with other conservationists to share learnings, and to look for follow-on funding building on your previous work. So I would advise all of you to, even before you start applying, to work on a theory of change for your project. What is the problem you're trying to solve, and what are the interventions and outcomes that you're working on? This will make sure that you have a logical approach and that you identify indicators that you can monitor to see if your interventions are successful. If you don't know how to make a theory of change, there is a lot of resources online to teach you, to learn from that. You can also keep an eye on the Conservation Connect LinkedIn page, as we sometimes give away course spots for an adaptive management and conservation standards training that also works towards building a theory of change. This will not only show you what you need to measure to see if your interventions are successful, but also measuring the right things can give you the proof of concept that you need to get that follow-on funding. So monitoring is key. We often don't see it in the project budgets that we get, but I do believe that monitoring costs are supposed to be in there. You can always ask your donor if you have doubts if they would cover it. But at Conservation Connect, for example, we always encourage people to include monitoring costs in their budget, as we feel that it is a part of your project, and it should be part of your project. I also put here, celebrate your wins. I will explain what I mean by that. Here is a small part of the theory of change of our conservation standards training that we do with Alcedo Conservation. In the little triangle on the left, you see the intervention, and then the outcomes in blue boxes on the right. And we monitor with this circle whether we're on track with this outcome. And I say monitoring is important so that you can analyze the right things and you can report on them. But it's also to keep track of your wins, let's say, your little wins. Because when one of these trackers move from red to yellow to green, celebrate this, right? It is very important to give yourself a compliment, your team, share it with your donor if it's a major milestone, and treat yourself to an extra coffee, because oftentimes the projects that you are working on, they're big and they're complex. So if we don't celebrate the little wins in between, it's easy to get discouraged. The second advice is to engage your donor. Of course, after you get a grant, most of you will check out what are the reporting requirements of this donor. But it is very nice to sometimes send a little update from the field. I really love receiving those. But be smart about time input. I put here as an advice to perhaps record quick videos with a phone. It can be very quick and you really don't need to spend too much time on editing. But realize that a donor is sitting very far away. I am sitting all the way in Amsterdam in an office. You're very far away, and it's sometimes hard for me to grasp what is your reality. And it's so nice to see a little video of people doing the work in the field, see them just do the measurements and doing some things, day-to-day things, and then seeing the surrounding around. It is definitely saying more than 1,000 words. So a little video can sometimes help engage your donor, or a little snippet, a photo, a nice update. This is a way you can engage your donors more. Also, one thing that might be worth checking is if your donor allows you to recycle your reports. At Conservation Connect, we don't always say it, but we do always accept, if we co-fund a project, that you just send us the report that you write for the other donor. We don't find it necessary that you rewrite a report that you've already written in our format. That is not necessary. We also accept it if you forward us the report of the other donor. This can save time. Last but not least, I would say use, but don't overuse AI. It can save time, and we see it more and more, but what the donor wants is the real story, and AI can take the soul out of the story. So I would say, I don't want to go into this too much, but I would say you can use AI for summarizing your work or to check your language, but don't let it write your report for you, because the heart in the story is really important. Which brings me to the third point. My third advice is telling your story. The donors love to hear your story. We love to be inspired, and this encourages us to maybe fund the project again, or to recommend it to someone else, but not just the donor, but I think everyone around you. There is enough bad news in the world at this moment. We all need little points of light, and we need this inspiration. And you should also not underestimate how much your stories mean to other conservationists, because they bring huge inspiration. And there might be a lot of people in the field that might feel a bit isolated, or that might feel like it's me against the world. And it's very encouraging for them to read about the stories of other conservationists working in the field. So please share your stories on your socials and also with your donors. Your donors might even be able to help you with creating more visibility for your story, for your project, and thereby also building on your work. And next to telling your story, it's also important to share your findings. So with local media and events, even schools, to engage with local communities and local authorities. Update your website and your Conservation Connect profile, so your results also show there. And you might even want to work on scientific publications. I want to also mention here the website Conservation Evidence, as this is an online open source journal that I put here, a print screen, and the website. I would recommend you all to visit this, because it is a great source of information, but it is also a journal that is free to publish in. So all the research and projects that test the effectiveness of conservation actions are welcome here. You see the screen is ordered on species, but I also have them on biome and in type of interventions. So it's really a great resource to take a look at. Fourth of all, connect with other conservationists. Please don't reinvent the wheel, and check it with others what's going on around you. If you're afraid for competition, which might be the case in your field, and you don't want to share your approach wildly, you can still look up other projects that are working, for example, on the same species or on a similar intervention or methodology elsewhere in the world. Again, conservation evidence can be a great resource to check on interventions and what works and what doesn't work, what has already been tested, and build on that. But if you're a member of the Conservation Connect platform, for example, you can also look, when you're logged in, you can see in the projects overview, you can search for specific species or a keyword to find other projects that work on that same topic, and then to connect with them. The picture I put here, I think is a very nice example of this. This is an organization called Fundación Atalopes. They work in Colombia on harlequin toads. I think this man is holding a little harlequin toad. And there is, in the Conservation Connect database, if you're looking for the genus Atalopes, there are already 28 active projects in South America on that genus alone. So it is nice then to take a look at what these other people are doing, especially actually with this species, it's mainly the same threat that they're all dealing with. So it's very interesting to also learn from others. My last advice is to build on your previous work when looking for follow-on funding. So back to your theory of change, one grant should always fall within a longer-term vision. I am aware of the fact that we as donors, we sometimes use the word project a little bit in a tricky way, sorry, because often we say, what is your project trying to do? Or describe your project when you apply for a grant. But a project might then just refer to a grant period. And your real project might be much longer term, right? So your project might fall within a longer term project. And I think it helps to explain to donors, whether that is in the updates or through reporting, what is your longer term vision and what comes next. So make sure that you use the results of your project so far to build your applications on. It is super strong for for a donor if you come with an application and you can say, I did a successful pilot, or I'm asking this grant to scale my efforts. Look at what I have achieved so far, right? So you make it logical, you make the next step logical, feasible, and you make us believe in that. If you don't have this yet, for example, it's not you haven't built a project yet, or you don't have that track record yet, you can use other sources such as conservation evidence, but also other literature sources to build your evidence and to make your next project, or to make your project seem feasible and logical to us. A last little piece of advice is that it is great to build a longer-term relationship with your donor, but please avoid donor dependency. So even if you have a donor that is willing to support you longer term, it is wise to always develop other income streams on the side, whether that is through tourism or volunteers or other donors that might step in. It is wise to always have some other donors or income streams ready, so that if one donor falls away, your project doesn't need to be on a standstill. So these are my 5 advices for today, to keep them bite-sized, to monitor the right things, ideally following a theory of change, to engage your donor, keep them engaged, to tell your story and share your findings, to connect with other conservationists to share learnings, and to build on your previous work when looking for follow-on funding. Thank you so much. I will stop sharing.
Thanks, Anne. That was really helpful. If you do have any questions specifically for Anne, please type those into the chat. And again, you can do that throughout this, and we'll be addressing some of those afterwards. But otherwise, Carla.
Thank you so much, April. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh, good. Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for that presentation, Anne. That's really useful. And I'm glad to touch on that, because now I will be touching on, well, what happens when you are rejected, right? And we'd like to provide you with like a short guide on what to do next and how to handle rejection as part of your conservation skills in the future. So first of all, let me introduce ourselves. We are the Conservation Leadership Program, and we are a 40-year partnership between BirdLife International, Fauna and Flora, and the Wildlife Conservation Society. And like our friends and colleagues here from other fund organizations, we provide small grants for early career conservationists. So let's dive into rejection. So one thing that I first want to touch is that we should normalize rejection as part of our growing process. I want to tell you, everyone here, that rejection is normal and it's actually very useful. And I want to make some points about rejection before diving into what I have considered the 5 steps around rejection. So first of all, let us tell you that small conservation grants, are highly competitive. And in fact, they're probably one of the most competitive grants all over the world, with many of them or many of us programs funding less than 10% or 20% of the proposals. So with these numbers, obviously it's expected that some rejection will have to happen at some point, right? And rejection is also not a judgment on your mission, and this is something that you should always remember. It's part of the process, but a process that can help you to become better. And like I was saying, many funded projects were rejected multiple times before success. And in fact, if you ask every funded conservationist that you admire, you will see that the majority of them have had a stock of rejections. And so many of us have gone through rejections, either when applying for a job or when trying to publishing. So please bear in mind that rejection is normal. And rejection is actually part of the training, not a failure. And this is a quote that I would like you to always remember when you're submitting a grant. And if you're not successful, that you should take that as part of your training, always, not as a failure. So saying that, I would like to dive in now into the 5 steps on how to handle rejection. So the first thing is step 1 is always pause and then review. And I know that rejection can be very difficult for some of us because we are really not, our mind is not built for no, are not built for rejection. So I will always recommend that, whenever you get your letter, and if the letter or the response is that your proposal have been rejected, please give yourself a day to first process what you're feeling, take a time to feel that emotionally, and then the next day come back and reread the decision. And that's why, because it is always important to separate emotion from information. It's good that you take the time to feel that have that emotional part, but then always come the next day with a refreshed mind and said, okay, let me read this, let me see what happened, and then do like a process, like an analysis process, and review what happened. Once you have done that, please look carefully on the comments, the scoring criteria, the hints, the language about fit and priorities. A lot of people always see the only big part that says, we regret to inform you, and they don't read the other part of the letter, which can tell you very important information of what happened to your proposal. So remember, when you read your letter, this is not about you, it's about alignment. How did your proposal align with what the funder was looking? So once you have done that, let's dive into step 2. Okay, you have read your letter, you know what happened, you understand what was the reason behind the decision. So the next step is ask for feedback. And some funders might give feedback as part of the process, and some might not. So if feedback isn't provided, we always recommend that you go back and ask professionally and politely. I've seen so many people that, they're rejected and come back and they only say 2 shorts, I saw that I was rejected, please tell me why. Remember, this is also about keep building your relationships. So if you're not selected and if you're not provided with feedback, go back and kindly, professionally, and politely ask for that. It is a reality that sometimes we will not be able to provide feedback because we receive a big amount of applications, but you can maybe ask someone else who had applied in the past also for feedback, because obviously they can tell you also if they probably were rejected too, or what helped them to succeed, or what was some of the advice. So the feedback doesn't necessarily has to come from the funder, but also from other applicants. And then also, think of feedback as free mentoring from senior conservation professionals. This is amazing because they are telling you for free, how can you improve? What can you do better? Maybe if you have to reshift something from your proposal. So take it as free mentoring whenever you're seeking for feedback. Now, the third step is, okay, you have time to process, you have asked for feedback, you're looking now into the big picture, and you can now diagnose the real issue. So this is something important that you have to remember, is that most proposals are not selected due to fixable reasons. Yes, there is the part in which obviously there's limited funding and how many applications can be supported per year, but also many of them do not go through different stages of the selection process due to fixable reasons. And this is where you have to pay a lot of attention. So the first thing is like look at what fit or didn't fit within your proposal. Look at what part of the project didn't match with the funder's priorities or geography. Make sure that you were clear about the idea that you were trying to propose as part of your application. Maybe the idea was clear, it was a great idea, which is what we see, but unfortunately the methods were unclear or the outcomes were not as clear as possible. Or for example, with the budget, this is something that we see a lot, the budget was not breakdown, was not really good. So look at those little things, obviously based on the feedback, but if not, come back on your own and review this part and make sure that all of these were clear. Maybe you will realize like, oh yes, go back to the guidelines and see like, oh, they were asking for a specific breakdown budget and I just did it like, as quick as possible. Go back, review, and make sure it's clear. Also look at the scale. Sometimes there are really good ideas, but then either the project is too ambitious or too small. So look at those tiny details that, once you have revisited each part of the application can tell you, oh, this is something that maybe I need to revisit or I may need to reshift. And then the last thing, it's about evidence. Perhaps there was not enough data, or the proof for the approach was not necessarily well defined. So make sure that you go section by section, reviewing your application and looking into those aspects. Something that it's really good, and I always give advice on, is like, think like a funder. It's like, if you were to fund this project, would you fund this project or not? And then that's a really good exercise, because it's like, oh, this idea, it's a fantastic, but of course in 1 year, I'm not gonna be able to complete it. I should probably make it a little bit, less ambitious. So also think it's good that you set your mind into thinking as a funder. If you were to give money to this project, would you or would not, and why? So that's a really good exercise that I like giving to a lot of the applicants. It's like, yeah, it's really helpful, because then it's like, oh yes, I realized that the idea was too broad, or like I didn't really give a good approach to my work. So yes, this is really important, and this is part of what can help you for the next step, which is strengthen, just don't scrap. I see many of the applicants that decide it's like, oh, I was rejected, then probably this is not a good idea. It's probably a good idea. It's just that you have to refine that idea, and that you need to look into what happened within this with this idea, right? So don't just go and like, scrap everything. After the step 3, go again and tighten your core story. So one of the first things you might have to do is clarify the conservation problem. Make sure that it's well defined, because this is one of the first things we look at in applications. Okay, this is definitely clarify the conservation problem, and it has to do with a lot what Anne said, right? You need the theory of change in order to be able to define the conservation problem and how you're going to address that conservation problem. Another thing to ask is, why is funding needed right now? This is a question that a lot of people forget to ask themselves. It's like, why is it that I really need this funding at this specific moment? Is it that, yes, and why is that it's important to ask yourself this? It is because if you don't get funded, then what happens next? For how long can you be without funding? Or it is necessarily right now that you have this funding because you're at the critical stage of your project. So think about that. Make yourself that question as you strengthen your application. Now, building on step 3, sharpen your goals, your methods, and your measurable outcomes, and make sure that, like I was saying, perhaps they're not too ambitious or not too small, that they are clear, that they are well detailed, that they align, the goals, methods, and activities and measurable outcomes align. You will be surprised how many times these 3-4 things, they look really well separately, but when you put them together, they don't align, and that's what makes the project for the most part, being not successful. So always make sure to sharpen those. Look back. It's okay to look back, take steps backwards, and then come back again and strengthen and retry, right? And then also simplify budgets. I know I said, yeah, you know, that you have sometimes to break down, or the majority of the time, you have to have a very breakdown detailed budget. Yes, but that doesn't mean you cannot simplify budgets when doing that. And the reason that I'm saying this is because sometimes you want to achieve all these goals and you're going to conduct all these activities, but then the budget, again, does not match or does not fit with what you're trying to do. So that's another reason why your application might not be successful. It's because those 5 main elements: goals, methods, outcomes, activities, and budget are not aligned. So please make sure that you take a look at that again and come back and strengthen. Now, having done that, you can now go reuse and resubmit strategically your proposal. So now you have make a review, you have think about what needed to be strengthened, what needed to be changed or reshifted. So you can reuse your application and you can resubmit it, but this is the specific thing. You have to do it strategically. And yes, one proposal can become 2 or 3 tailored applications, particularly when your application, your first one, you realize that it was too ambitious and that maybe you have to separate that into different goals or into different approaches. It can give you the opportunity to develop 3 different applications, 2 or 3 different tailored applications. That is the keyword, tailored applications. Just don't go back and try to do the same application once and again in just changing terms or just like, rephrasing things, because that's not going to be successful. And instead of 1 rejection, you might risk the chance to be 3 rejections, right? So here is when you have to really think about if you plan to reuse and resubmit strategically, what is the approach of every application that you're going to submit, if it covers all the needs that you're looking to cover with these grants or not. The second thing is that you need to adjust your language and goals, again, to match each funder's missions. Like I said, here we are 8 representatives of different funder organizations. And although, yes, we support small grants, when you go out and read our guidelines, some of them have different approaches to what we support. Some of us might be more than species center. Some of us might be open only to certain geographical areas. Some of us are supporting thematic specific areas. So look at that. And that's why also this will give you the opportunity to strengthen and perhaps tailor 1 or 2 other applications. But again, make sure that you read what every funder supports, but also make sure to read your guidelines, because that's another thing that always happens is you get under the idea that, oh, they all have these conservation grants, but then you don't get to read specific guidelines. And guidelines are very important for you when you're preparing applications. Now, again, track where you have applied and what feedback you have received. And this goes along with I just said earlier about knowing your funder and knowing what are you applying for and knowing what do you need funding for, right? Another thing is to look and identify alternative small grants. Here it's, a group of 8 funders at the moment, but there are more small grants over there that focus on specific things. Like, for example, there are ones that are small amount of funds for technology, or just for equipment, or it's just for training yourself in a specific area. Look for those, because every grant out there might fulfill one or 2 or 3 skills that you are in need of, and 2 or 3 things that you need for your project. So look out there, make your research. Sometimes even other funders have a list of other different funders. So make sure to explore the websites. There's a reason why we always share with you our websites, and that just for you to go and take a look at that. And the other thing is, like, if you get rejected, it is important that you keep building relationships and keep doing the work. We funders love momentum. So we love seeing that even though maybe you didn't get the grant, you were out there scaling your project. It's not necessarily that you need the money to scale your project. You can do it maybe by starting like an Instagram page in which you will be updating currently people about the project, and we will start seeing at those things when you apply. Don't let the time in between the decision of a grant and the next call for application you keeping your project without doing anything. Keep doing the work, because that's also proof of action, and proof of action is really important when you're applying for grants. There are different timelines in between one funder and another. And yes, preparing an application requires time and requires a lot of effort. And in between that, we always recommend the applicants to keep doing your work. Keep doing your work, because that's what also will provide you with skills on maybe like, writing, or maybe like outreach, or maybe like I know there's so many skills. Sorry, I don't have them right now out of my head, but there's so many skills that you can keep building as you also keep doing the work. So do that. And when I'm talking about building relationships, is building relationships, yes, with maybe advisors, or with maybe other senior conservationists, but also with your funders. And you don't have to wait for when the application process is happening to build those relationships. I really enjoy when I go out in the conferences and people know that we're going to be there, and they come and approach, and it's like, hey, can you come and watch my poster and see my presentation? And it's like, yeah, of course. That is also keeping the relationship with the funder, right? So we encourage you to do that. You can seek out, when funders are going to be at conferences, at events, and come and approach us. We really like talking to future applicants, and we really like to know what our conservationists, early career conservationists, doing out there in the world. It's a really nice way of engaging also, so please do that. And remember, all these ideas and all this work, yes, it requires time and it requires effort. But remember, this is all helping you to build a proposal portfolio, not just a single shot. Being an early career conservationist involves also building your own portfolio of your project, of who you are as a conservationist. And that will give you more opportunities when you're applying for funding. Now, these are the 5 steps that I always recommend, but I would like to give you some final takeaways. And I would like to let you know that rejection should be seen as career capital. It's nice, it's part also of your career, and I like treating rejection as that, as career capital. Every rejection improves your grant writing skills, but also improve other skills. Very important is, remember, persistent unlearning provides you with higher funding success. One thing that is really important and that I would like to highlight is that a rejected grant is not a stop sign, but an opportunity to shift the course. So this is like when you're driving and you're finally in the highway, and then you decide to take an exit, and you decide that the exit has it's blocked, so you have to come back around and keep going on the highway until you find the other exit that will take you. And maybe that other exit is actually better to get to your destiny than what you were thinking with the previous exit. So please, when you're working with your applications, and if you get unsuccessful, remember that is not a stop sign, but an opportunity to always improve. And remember, conservation careers are built over time. And this is step 1, not the end. So there will be many opportunities, and we encourage you to keep looking at the opportunities that are outside there. So with this, I would just like you to go back and remember that rejection is common, it's survival, and it's very useful. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Carla. That was actually very inspiring. And of course, and I think there's a lot of good things there for remembering that if you receive a rejection, one, you're not alone. It's very common. It's going to happen. No one, even highly regarded and internationally recognized conservationists, they all have rejection still too. So we have about 10 to 15 minutes for questions. So again, please, if you have any questions you want to add into the chat, to do so. Otherwise, we'll start, with a few that I have for both Anne and Carla, but as well as some of our other colleagues from small grants funding as well. But so Anne, also, I didn't say this earlier, but I really loved your first comment that you made about, celebrating your wins, even if they're small. And again, I think, and I hope for everyone here, please take all of this, very positively, because it's really important. We know it's hard, and we know that it takes a lot to get to where you want to be. But so, Anne, I just do have, one question for you as well that you can, help. But one thing is that, these are smaller grants, but how do, funding institutions assess the impact in small scale projects that might still be in that exploration stage or collecting baseline data?
Yes, thank you. Thank you for that question. Am I unmuted? Yes, okay, right. I think when you're starting up a small scale or working on your baseline data, I cannot stress enough that a logical approach is very important. So you need to measure, obviously, the right things. I think when you're measuring baseline data, and even when you're just starting out, it is important to draw already a line to where you want to go, and also what you want to do with that baseline data. So for example, baseline data can be used to change an IUCN status and update. For example, if there's a data deficient species, if you're collecting data, that is extremely valuable to update a status and get actual real-time feeling of how a species is doing in the field. So that's real impact to me in the field. Sometimes when you have baseline data, this can also be used to do other follow-up interventions that might have the goal to increase populations compared to the baseline data. So you always need the baseline as a first step. And I think, the way we assess it, we don't look just at one thing. If I may speak just for myself as a donor, we look indeed at how the work is executed, what has been done by the organization in terms of using the data and how you will build on it, but also in terms of how is this project embedded in the local community, how is the engagement with local stakeholders, which really for us builds the case of it shows the sustainability of a project on the longer run, and also the potential of where it can go in the longer run. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. So I do see we have one question in the chat. And so this, Anne or anyone else, please feel free to comment on this. But the question is, how can a proposal be made attractive to donors if it doesn't include extensive community-based activities, but instead aims to generate critical technical information to guide effective conservation actions? And I think this is related to a bit about that question you just touched on. And the context around this is that a lot of funders want to see community-based activities, but a lot of communities are a bit tired of meetings and workshops.
I can imagine. if I may just quickly relate to it, to build on my previous answer, for example, because I also mentioned community engagement. Obviously, community engagement, or at least that the project is well embedded in local context, that is important. But I can imagine that you say people are tired of workshops, or you don't always have, this is not always a critical part of every part of the project. I think I want to refer to something that Carla mentioned, which is to always explain the urgency of what you're doing. If you're at this moment, what is needed is a technical step. So to generate some critical technical information to guide effective conservation actions, you can argue why this is a bottleneck at this moment that prevents next steps to happen. So I think the urgency, conservation urgency, is always very key to explain in your application.
That's great, thank you. And certainly a lot of what Carla also touched on, I think, covers what might come up for people in that, what is really important to make sure that you're getting right and are focusing on in your applications. So we have another question that comes through. So that is a specific question that we can address in the chat. So that makes sense and that's fine. It's about certain requirements on CLP, so we can answer that in the chat for you. But another question that that came up quite a bit in those that were submitted in advance was, and maybe Carla, you can help with this too, because it's kind of with the rejection and selection process, but how do we decide, as funders, do we decide whether a project is a good fit for a specific grant? So what makes that proposal stand out, maybe at those early stages when there might be other applicants with a similar profile?
Yeah, thank you, April. Well, I think the first thing to clarify is that there are different stages within the selection process in which there are different considerations. So, for example, within CLP, we have first one, and that probably it's the similar to other funders, is like we need to make sure that these projects are within the criteria that the funder is asking. And the reality is that a lot of the applications do not make this transition because of some of the reasons that I just mentioned, right? It's like it's important that as applicants you read the guidelines carefully and see if your proposal it's kind of like fitting within those criteria and those eligibility. We do see applications that are probably really good for other funders and for us are not necessarily good, and that's what we say it when we say it openly. It's like we are sorry that your proposal was not successful, but this is the reason. And I think we really would like encourage all of you to read the guidelines. We know that sometimes it involves, certain or different steps, but it's important. It's important because that could be crucial between you being shortlisted to the other stages, all right? So that's one of the first thing. And the second thing is that even if you make it to the end of the selection process, like we were saying, as funders, we can only fund a specific number of applications per years. We depend on a yearly fund for being able to support, right? So we can only cover that specifically. And the way we decide is like we take a really good amount of time and expertise or reviews from experts for you to be selected or not selected. It's a process that involves carefully reviewing each of the applications, making sure that obviously the project it's fitting within what we are trying to fund. And although we would like to give, sometimes it's really as funders, it's really hard to say no to certain proposals. The reality is that it can be very competitive, and we need to be very careful about what we're funding. But that doesn't mean that you're not, like I was saying, that doesn't mean that you're not good, that the mission is not good, or that that your project is not good. We often will really like to see this project funded. But like I said, there's a specific scoring cards or specific internal process that we follow, and we take into account all of these to select the projects. So yeah, I think it would be really good if other funders can also provide some insights on this, because I think it's really important for them to know, what happened during this process, and that yes, it's not always easy, but it's definitely something that we take really serious as part of our project, is like, how do we assess each of these projects?
Thanks, Carla. I want to get to, there's a couple more questions in the chat. So Garima, thank you. How can someone who is independently working apply for such grants without having any affiliation? Nicholas, or Lisa? Oh,
yeah. Yes, and maybe Nicholas is actually more suited to answer, because I know that there's, it depends. My answer would be it depends per funder, right? And at Conservation Connect, this is kind of tricky because we only support organizations and not individuals. And some funders only support individuals and not organizations, and some do both. So I believe MBZ indeed does both. In case a donor, as Conservation Connect, for example, only supports organizations, you cannot apply as an individual. So this is one of those criteria that is good to pay attention to, as Carla mentions, because it's no use of writing a whole application if you do not fit that one main criteria. But it is possible to, for example, temporarily affiliate with an organization, to say, I want to do this project with that organization, and that if that organization works with you and vouches for you, let's say, then you can still submit a project under the name of the organization. It's maybe good to realize why donors say this. We don't support individuals is because for donors, it might be a whole other due diligence story, whether they support individuals or not. We, like in terms of due diligence and being able to transfer the grant, we can only wire to organizations. So if you're temporarily associated with an organization, that also does the trick, because then the grant money can go to the organization and they can hire you as a consultant. That is a bit of a trick, and it works, I think. I don't know, Nicholas, if you want to add anything to this.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you for the question as well, and the opportunity to address it. As you say, yes, Anne, it varies so much from one organisation to another, and a lot of organisations, a lot of funding donor organisations will only give grants to people affiliated with organisations for the due diligence reasons that Anne mentioned. At the MBZ Fund, we do give grants to individuals. And the reason why is partly because to get around the issues that Anne mentioned, and to have the opportunity to support people who aren't necessarily part of organizations. But the way in which we are able to try to address some of the challenges that arise with that is and it comes back a little bit to the question of who do we give grants to and how are they assessed, is to see that projects and individuals are part of a larger network. So the projects being implemented and the proposals being put forward plug into larger and other initiatives, that they're somehow associated with other work that has been done, that individuals have worked with other people or working towards, let's say, conservation action plans for a specific species, or have other partnerships, even if it's just them as an individual, with other organizations and with other people. And so I think it's very difficult for a donor to give a grant to someone who's entirely isolated and on their own, to go to the opposite extreme. That is very difficult. And I think probably no donor would give a grant to anyone who seems to be coming out of the blue. But some donors are able to give grants to individuals where they can see that they are working towards a common cause and in collaboration with other people, even if not through formal institutional affiliation.
Thank you. We had a little bit of a late start, so maybe we can go at least one more question. But Simon, I think this next one is a good one for you, because we also had come through the question of, once you have a grant, what happens if, something goes wrong or you don't get the expected results? And I think that also kind of links to this question of, can you give an example of a failed project and how that worked?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can say through having reviewed literally thousands of projects, it's extremely rare that something somewhere along the line doesn't go according to plan. I would be very surprised if somebody came out at the end and said, yes, everything worked exactly as we expected. We had no issues. So I think it's a bit like the other things that have been talked about, a bit like rejection, really. It's part and parcel of doing a project. Almost certainly something will not work the way you expected, or perhaps you'll try a particular technique and it simply doesn't work in the situation where you're trying to apply it. So I think you should expect that things will not go according to plan. It's just really how you deal with that when it happens. And it's how we tend to gauge, what we feel about individuals undertaking projects. It's how they manage to deal with these unexpected events. And I'm often very surprised by how people do manage to get around sometimes quite very difficult situations. But the important thing, I think, is if it's a major issue, it's important to stay in touch with your donor, to keep them informed about what's going on. If there's some sudden major issue, perhaps suddenly a conflict has broken out in the area where you were working and you're not able to do any of the work you expected to do. It's important that your donor's aware of this and you talk to them and give them an opportunity to discuss what might be the way forward. And also don't be afraid of reporting when things went wrong. I know with many people, they don't want to tell their donors that actually things didn't go according to plan. Perhaps they didn't achieve what they were hoping to achieve, because this is all important information. And I think it's always worth sharing sort of negative results, if you like, with people as well as positive ones, because it can show, for example, you might have tried a particular technique in a certain situation and it simply doesn't work. That could be very important information for people in the future who might be doing something similar. So I think it's important to be honest when these things happen and to talk to your donor about going through potential solutions. Don't just go ahead and do things without actually informing them first.
Great, thank you. We are out of time, so I know we didn't get to everything, and of course there were loads of questions that were submitted previously when you signed up. But so just a reminder, so we will send around the recording and with some extra links as well to different websites and guidelines, and we'll see if we can also maybe answer some of the commonly answered questions as well. But with that, I want to thank, our two presenters as well as our other colleagues and funders on here to, help put this together as well as answer some of your questions. But thank you all very much and good luck with your conservation journeys and applying for grants.